Have you heard of the SOAP method? SOAP stands for Scripture, Observation, Application, Prayer. It's the Bible study method that I was taught as a kid. Maybe you were taught a similar method, or maybe you use things like devotionals, character studies, or Bible in a year. There are many different techniques for studying and applying the Bible, but today I want to take you through the technique that has been the most helpful for me, specifically when studying and applying the Gospels. In his book, Read the Bible for a Change, Ray Lubeck provides what he calls the 4-step Bible study. It's like SOAP, but better, I think. According to Lubeck, the first step in studying any passage is seeing. And seeing means simply asking who, what, where, when, and how questions of the text. Questions like, who wrote this book? What is the main idea being promoted? When was the book written? Where does the action in the story take place? How does the author communicate this passage, aka what genre? In other words, seeing the text means humbly coming before the words of the passage and observing as objectively as possible all of the elements at play. When we do this well, we're set up for step 2, understanding. Understanding takes us one step deeper by asking, what does the text mean? In this step, we do things like watch for what the author is claiming to be true. We seek to discern the author's main purpose in writing in the first place. We trace the author's flow of thought through the passage. We connect similarities and parallels and contrasts. This step is less about the physical layout or facts of the passage and more about listening for the heart or meaning behind the words. Then step 3, sharing, asks, what truth is the text teaching? Now, this one can be a little bit difficult to define, but it's so important for us to understand. This step searches for what Lubeck calls the shared truth, or truth with a capital T. In other words, what underlying or universal concept or prescription is being communicated through this ancient text. Shared truth is one that is communicated by God through the author to the original audience, but also for the benefit of a future audience. And a shared truth applies and remains true through all 4 of those parties. Let me give an example. In Matthew 6, Jesus gives his famous teaching on prayer. He says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." What is the shared truth in this passage? Well, not many of us have trouble praying out loud in the synagogues or in the streets today. That is a cultural application or example, not a universal shared truth. But also, very few of us exclusively pray in private behind closed doors. This is a contextual example given by Jesus. Again, not an eternal shared truth. One way of stating the shared truth in this passage is to say that prayer is not meant to be used as currency to gain status among people, but rather it is an act of intimate communion with God. And that theological statement is consistent with the character of God. It was true in Jesus' day, and it's still true for us today. We all share that truth. Make sense? Of course, though, we can't just stop with study. And I love what Lubeck says here. He says the Bible has achieved its goal of transforming us when we prove that we are willing participants in its truth claims. Remember, the whole point of reading the Gospels is not information, but transformation. This is where we get to our final step, responding. This is the application, the so what part. Lubeck claims that in any passage, the reader can find outward behaviors or inward attitudes to adopt. And in most passages, you will find both happening at the same time. Inward attitudes would include things like peace, patience, or reverence for God. And we discover those attitudes by asking the question that we talked about last week. What is God trying to do in me through this text? And then outward behaviors would include things like generosity, honesty, service, aka what is God wanting to do through me? So there you have it, Lubeck's 4-step Bible study. Seeing or observing the text, understanding, searching for its meaning, sharing, discovering the universal shared theological truth, and responding by adopting the outward behaviors and inward attitudes described. Now, I want to stop here for a minute and say, this might seem like a lot. And it kind of is, especially if your normal mode of operation is just to read the text and then move on. But it is by reading and studying and applying the text in this way that we will not only be transformed ourselves, but we will also be equipped to take part in the mission of bringing God's kingdom down to earth, which was Jesus's whole point and ministry in the first place. And so as an encouragement and hopefully a challenge, I will leave you with one final quote from Lubeck. It says this: "Becoming an ideal reader requires my entire being, heart, soul, mind, emotions, actions, and imagination." Hey friends, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please, if you would, consider giving to our Patreon page. For as little as $1 a month, you can help to make sure that these videos keep being uploaded for free for you every single week. That is all I have for you this week. Next week, we are concluding our summer reading series on how to read the gospel. I hope to see you there. Keep being awesome.